I don't know why I thought you wouldn't be able to see this side of this wall. I didn't plan it through. Anyway, my fat's running around my room, so if you hear like clicking and clacking, it's just him. So we're making it work. We're getting it together. Being a single father's hard. Anyway, hello. My name is Hugh Ramus. This is Cooking Up Crime. Today we're doing something different. We don't have a filter. We don't have food. We're just doing it. We're just doing the true crime thing. I'll have coffee because we're not getting that crazy. Anyway, these are my notes. So today we're going to be talking about the Bender family, or the Bloody Benders, whichever you prefer. I prefer the Bloody Benders because it kind of sounds like a British insult. You bloody Bender. Anyway, never mind. Shut up, Matthew. In October of 1870, 5 families had bought land and made a homestead in Osage, Kansas. These 5 families were spiritualist, meaning that they were into clairvoyance and psychics and mediums and stuff like that. Making it work, doing the most. John Bender was a man, and he was a German man, and he moved to the Osage, Kansas place, and had bought 160 acres of land along the Great Osage Trail. And this was basically the only way to get to the west from there was through this trail. So he registered 160 acres of land. We're not going to get into the horribleness that was early American life about stealing land from the natives and we're not going to get into that because it's horrible, and I'm just going to get upset if we talk about it. It doesn't matter, but you know what I mean, okay? Now that we're all caught up to speed. Okay, John arrived with his son, John Jr., LOL. And they basically built a cabin, built a well, and built a barn. And then after they were done building this, they sent for John Sr.'s wife, Elvira, and their daughter, Kate. We're going to be calling them John and John Jr. So if I say John Bender, or he's sometimes called Pa Bender too, we're talking about the dad. And if we say John Jr., we're talking about the son. I'm going to say Jr. and I'm going to say, yeah, anyway. Their cabin was served for 2 purposes. Basically, they had a giant picture like the old Oregon Trail game, and how they have that wagon on the front of it. It's a Facebook game, I think, but it's also a card game, I believe. And the canvas sheet over the wagon part, yeah, they used that to divide the front from the back cabin. And the back was the living quarters, and the front was the general store where they sold various dry goods. Also, they had a kitchen table where travelers could come in and have a meal and stop for the night, and sometimes they would spend the night as well. I don't know where they would sleep. I don't know if they all shared a bed. That's kind of weird. Elvira and Kate got to work in, and they made 2 acres of land into a vegetable garden where they could grow their own food, and they also made an apple orchard. And this was all north of the cabin. John Bender was a 60-year-old man. He didn't speak English barely at all, and what he did speak was usually unintelligible. He would often get frustrated with people very easily. His interactions with people were very short and angry. Quote, he was a repulsive, hideous brute without a redeeming trait, dirty, profane, and ill-tempered. End quote. Whatever that says about John Bender now. Removing you, because I feel like I'm just too far away from whatever's happening. Okay. Elvira was his 55-year-old wife, and she also spoke very little English. She did not get along with the neighbors at all. They called her a she-devil. Quote, old Mrs. Bender was a dirty old Dutch crone. Her face was a fit picture of the midnight hag that wove the spell murderous ambition about the soul of Macbeth. What a great insult. Put that in someone's Instagram bio or something. John Jr., their son, was a 25-year-old, and he was considered fairly attractive. He had auburn hair and a mustache, except he would laugh unprovoked, and they started calling him a half-wit. Quote, young Bender, seen when excited, recalled the grave-robbing hyena at once to mind. These are just great insults. Who came up with these? Kate Bender was a 23-year-old. She was the most accustomed to American life out of the family. She spoke English with very little of an accent, and she regarded herself as a spiritualist healer and a psychic. And she would promote her services by just passing out flyers. Now, because the 5 families that lived here were all kind of spiritualists, they all kind of no one thought of her as a witch. You know what I'm saying? She would do seances and educated on spiritualism, and also promoted free love. She became a stop for travelers to walk and see Kate Bender, the psychic girl who does seances and that kind of stuff. She was also kind of controversial because In her promotion of free love, she basically came out and said that her and her brother were like sleeping together and how this should not be frowned upon, which is we're not gonna get into it. Anyway. She was kind of controversial for other reasons too. In like her seminars and lectures of whatever, she would often proclaim that murder may be a dictation of good, and also that no one should get in the way of your sexual expression, which ties into the whole sleeping with your brother thing. Okay, I heard a scream and I didn't know if that was my ferret or like a child, but thank God it was a child. I thought my last video was going to be the longest, but this probably is going to take the cake, so grab a snack. The parents really kept to themselves. They didn't really mingle with the community at all, but the children did do Sunday school every week, and they often mingled with the locals, whatever that meant, because like they were the locals. Here's kind of like when we get into the nitty gritty of the family. You ready? They claimed to be German immigrants. However, there was no evidence saying that they were from Germany or that they were even a family. Suspicious beans. John Bender could have been born in Germany, but he also could have been from the Netherlands, and he could have been born John Flickinger, and that'll come up later. Some newspapers of the time reported that Elvira was actually born Almira Hill Marks, and she married a man named Simon Marks, and they had 12 kids together, but then he died. Then she married William Stephen Griffith, and there was many rumors that Elvira actually killed many of her husbands, but this was never proven. But the last name Mark comes up later. Remember that. Write it down. Do something. Mental note. Take a picture. We're coming back to it, okay? Kate was thought to have been Elvira's 5th daughter, and John Jr. and Kate were thought to not even have been siblings, that they were married by common law. So this kind of like gets in the way of like maybe John Jr. is John's kid, and then Kate is Elvira's kid, and then when Elvira and John got together, John Jr. and Kate got together. I can see that being a thing. It was like life with Derek. In May of 1871, nearby in Drum Creek, the body of a man by the name of Jones was found, and his skull had been bashed in and his throat had been cut. In February of 1872, 2 more bodies of men were found, and they had similar injuries as Jones. So like I said, the Osage, the Osage, the Osage, whatever trail was the only way to get to the west that way. And by 1873, the trail had gotten very suspicious by people, and it was common that people would just avoid the trail altogether to go west. I honestly thought that I was like this the whole time, and then I just looked at myself and I was like this, and I was just like, I can't even feel my face. It's fine. The area began to be known as the area of horse thieves and villains. This had caused people to just avoid the trail altogether, but also it caused vigilante groups to be formed, and they basically took the law into their own hands because the law wasn't doing their part apparently, and then they would arrest people they thought were guilty of the missing people disappearances thingies, and then the authorities would later just release them. But a couple of men were actually found innocent, but the vigilante group ran them out of the county anyway. So this vigilante group was kind of all over the place, and they were kind of just like, they had good intentions, but they just like weren't executing that well. And it's like, at that time, you just should leave it to the authorities. And as we're going to get into it, the authorities actually did a pretty good job, if I do say so myself. In the winter of 1872, George Newton Doncourt and his infant daughter Marianne had left Independence, Kansas to start a new life in Iowa, but they were never seen again. In the spring of 1873, George's neighbor, Dr. York, he had gotten suspicious about George's disappearance, and he began the trail through the Osage Trail, and he was basically just like knocking on doors, asking if anybody had seen his neighbor or his daughter throughout the entire way. And he had gone all the way to Fort Scott where his brother Ed lived, and on March 9th of 1873 he turned around to go back home, but he was never seen again. Suspicious. After the disappearance of Dr. York, his brother Ed, who lived in Fort Scott, and another brother Alexander, who lived in Independence, Kansas, they began looking for their brother. Ed actually got a group of 50 men to go up and down the track, and they were just asking every single person they asked on the way there and the way back. They knocked on every single door they saw, just asking every single person where their brother was and if they had seen him, if they knew anything about him, but this didn't really get very far. On March 28th of 1873, Ed actually stayed at the Benders Inn and asked them if they had seen his brother. They said that Dr. York had come in for dinner, but that he had left and they hadn't seen him since. And they suggested that Native Americans actually probably killed him or took him captive or something. And Ed agreed that this was a possible solution, and he stayed for dinner at the Benders Inn. In the coming days, Ed had actually heard reports of a woman fleeing the Benders Inn because Elvira Bender had threatened her with a knife. And after this, on April 3rd, Ed walked up in there and was like, hey, y'all threatened this lady. Where's my brother? And Elvira denied understanding English, but John Jr. and Kate denied these claims. Ed reiterated why he was there, because of the lady fleeing, and Elvira was sent into a blind rage, and she basically just started screaming about how the woman had cursed her coffee, and then she kicked Ed and the men out. Oh, he was there with 2 armed men, I don't know if I said that. And she had kicked Ed and the 2 armed men out, and the men left, and they were just like, hold the phone, she knows English. She told us before that she didn't know English. She knows English. She knows it a lot better than what she's letting on people believe that she thought. Suspicious beans. You can't trust nobody. You can't trust people. Nope. After Ed was like walking away from the house with the 2 men, Kate actually ran out to them and was like, I'm really sorry about your brother. If you come back, I'm gonna use my clairvoyance powers and we're gonna see if we can talk to him beyond the grave. But you have to come alone. And this is suspicious because I know nothing about clairvoyance. I thought I was like talking to the dead, so please correct me if I'm wrong. I just see my ferrets doing. Hold on. I'm sorry. I thought I heard him screaming again. But anyway, they basically tell you, like in the Chris Watts case, how he was referring to his wife and children in past tense. They tell you, hey, watch out for past tense, because how do they know that they're dead? So if she's clairvoyant and she's like, I'm gonna go help, like, use my powers, we could talk to your dead brother. How you know he's dead? I didn't catch that in my research. Clairvoyance could also not just be talking to the dead, but could be like other things. I don't know, but I thought it was talking to the dead, so we're just gonna roll with that, okay? The armed men that Ed came with thought that they and their neighbors, the Roaches, which, like, in this time, I believe you could, like, come to America and, like, pick your own last name. Why in the world would you pick Roach? Anyway, the armed men were convinced that the Roaches also had something to do with it, and they were ready to just, like, take them all one by one, hang them in the courtyard, and just, like, hang them from a tree, and just be like, done, we're done with this. But Ed was unfortunately moral and was like, no, we need more evidence. However, if Ed just went along with this, so many less people would have died. What a darn shame. The entire community was in an uproar about these disappearances. It was just chaos. Everyone just started pointing the finger at everybody else and was just like, you're it. No, you're it. You're the reason why they're going and like the people are disappearing. You're the reason why everyone's showing up dead. They just kept going and blaming every single person until a town meeting had occurred and 75 people came. I'm assuming this was before like women and children could go, because Ed, John, and John Jr. came, so I'm assuming Kate and Elvira weren't allowed. I don't really know. The meeting concluded saying that every single house would be searched in the local area. 3 days after the town hall meeting, this man named Billy Toll was driving his cattle past the inn, and he had noticed that the entire inn was empty, and all of the cattle was all like the animals, they were going unfed. So Ed took this to authorities, but there was like weather problems, and the authorities actually couldn't get to the Bender Inn to investigate for a couple of days. But then they got a search party, including Ed York, to go to the inn, and the inn was stripped of everything: clothes, food, anything that could have been strapped up into a wagon was taken, and they were out. The authorities, so the group was like searching in the house, and they were just like, it smells really freaking bad. They basically found that the odor was coming from a trapdoor underneath a bed, which somebody's sleeping there. How could you sleep with that bad odor? It doesn't matter. They took off the trapdoor, and they found this 6-foot deep hole. It was 7 feet wide at the top, but it was 3 feet wide at the bottom. So imagine like a square, 7 feet wide, and then it kind of like got smaller into a 3 feet square at the bottom. It had a stone floor, and there was blood on the floor of it. And then they broke up the floor, but there was nothing below it. And then all the men, I don't know how this happened. I don't know how houses were built 200 years ago, but this is just crazy, because they took all the men of the group literally just picked up the cabin and moved it. Like, picked it up and moved it. I'm just like, who? Anyway, so then they searched underneath the cabin and nothing was found either. The investigation moved to the vegetable garden, right? And so it was there they found the body of Dr. York, and I'm assuming Ed was just like, what happened? Anyway, the search party finds another 9 possible grave sites, and then once they thought that they had found them all, they went to bed, and they were just like, we're gonna search this in the morning. So in the next morning, hold on, let me read my notes. The following morning, 8 bodies had been found in the 9 grave sites, and a different body had been found in the well. And 8, like the well, that's where they get in their water. This must have been the most recent death. I just thought of this. It must have been the most recent one, because like they can't be having a dead body contaminate their water supply. This must have been someone at their house, and they were just like, oh no, we're caught, we gotta go. So then they just dumped her in the well, or her. I don't know which one it was. But 8 out of the 9 had their heads bashed in and their throats cut. The 9th body was a young girl, and she didn't have any sort of physical damage to her body that merited her cause of death. so they assumed that she was strangled or buried alive. The community just was enraged. Again, I keep saying that word a lot in this video, but they were just really upset, and they were just like, what's gonna happen? They found a man named Brockman. Let's go with that. Brockman. And he was reportedly a friend of the Benders. They took him, hung him from a beam until he lost consciousness in the cabin. They hung him from a beam in the cabin. They hung him from a beam, like a support beam in the cabin, until he lost consciousness. Then they cut him down, interrogated him, hung him again, interrogated him again, and then hung him again, and then cut him down and interrogated him again. How horrible. Inside the inn, a Roman Catholic prayer book. The sun's going down, so it's about to get real dark real fast. A Roman Catholic prayer book was found, and in German was written, Johanna Bender, born July 30th of 1848. John Gebhardt came to America on July 1st of 18... ? I don't know if that's because they couldn't read the handwriting or if it was literally just question marks. Big slaughter day, Jan 8th. Hell departed. And these were like different notes throughout, whatever. The murders became very famous, and the cabin was completely destroyed by souvenir hunters. They took the stones of the well, the bricks of the house, the foundation. They took everything from the house and just completely deconstructed it to where it was just the land underneath it. Crazy. People are crazy. So remember Dr. York and Ed's brother, Alexander. Remember him, Alexander York. He was the state senator at the time, and he offered a $1,000 reward, which is about equivalent to $21,000 today, for the Bender's arrest. And on May 17th, the governor, Thomas A. Osborne, offered a $2,000 reward, which was like $42,000 today, for the Bender's arrest. Through the investigation, they found out that the Benders would basically, this was like the average night. They would lure someone into their cabin, give them the seat of honor at the kitchen table over a trap door that was against the curtain, the wagon curtain, remember, that divided the room? And Kate would distract them, I'm guessing through some like psychic nonsense or like clairvoyance or like voodoo. John Jr. would be waiting behind the curtain, and the person would sit down at the seat, and then one of them would just like slam a hammer up against the side of his head, killing him. And then Elvira or Kate would just cut their throats to ensure that they were dead. And then their bodies would, they would open the trapdoor below the body would fall in to the trapdoor to be dealt with later. This way of killing them was supported by people who had visited the inn, and we'll get into those later. But they couldn't figure out why the Benders started killing people, because some of the guests were wealthy and some of them weren't, and they weren't even always like their possessions weren't always stolen. It just kind of depends on whatever mood they were in, but it seemed to be that they just killed for the thrill of it. William Pickering was a surviving victim. He said that he was invited to the inn, and Kate had instructed him to sit at the seat in front of the curtain, but he didn't want to because it had stains on it, and then she threatened him with a knife before he hightailed it out of there. A Catholic priest was another surviving victim, and he said that he was invited to the inn but then left after he saw John Jr., one of the men, trying to conceal a hammer, and he was like, nope, gotta go, this is out, I'm done. Okay. 2 men had gone to the inn to witness Kate's powers, and basically she had instructed them to come sit at the table, but they didn't want to. They wanted to sit at the counter in the grocery part of the store. I thought it was the same room, so I don't really know why it matters. Must be like a huge cabin, I have no idea. But then after they refused to sit at the table, Kate became abusive towards them, and then she was like, come sit at the table or else. And they were like, no. And then the 2 men stepped out from behind the curtain, and they were like, we gotta go because this is weird. It's getting weird. We didn't sign up for this. We gotta go. So they left too, and they survived. More than 12 bullet holes were found in the roof and the walls of the inn, suspecting that some people had tried to fight back after being struck with a hammer. But I guess after being hit with a hammer, you can't really do much, and so you're just kind of like, I have a gun. Anyway, that was a bit much, Matthew. Detectives had found wagon tracks, and they had followed the wagon tracks until when they found the Bender's wagon, where the horses drawing the carriages, the wagons, were seen starving. One was lame. I don't know if that meant that it was dead. I don't want to think about it. I didn't even want to Google it. I'm really upset about these horses, honestly. Basically, the wagon had nothing in it. It was just abandoned, and there was evidence that the family had bought train tickets to Humboldt, Kansas. There was evidence that John Jr. and Kate had actually gotten off the train at Humboldt, Kansas, and then got a different train to Denison, Texas. From there, they actually went into an outlaw county where the authorities kind of stopped following them. Basically, an outlaw county is whenever the authorities don't have any power there and the citizens can fight back. It's, quote, a land unprotected by law. And basically, if you were like an authority figure, you were pretty much dead if you walked in there. One of the detectives claimed that he had followed the couple to the border of Mexico. I think it was Mexico, and I wrote down New Mexico by accident. But it was either New Mexico or Mexico, one of the two. Mexico makes more sense in my brain. A detective had followed them to the border, where he had learned that John Jr. had died of internal bleeding. Now, going back to Humboldt, Kansas, it was reported that John Bender and his wife Elvira had bought tickets for St. Louis, Missouri. A lot of vigilante groups were formed as a result of this, and one of them had claimed to have found the Bender family and that they had killed all of them on the spot except Kate, which they took her and burned her alive. I'm assuming this is because she thought that she had psychic powers, or believed she had psychic powers, or actually, whatever. It's offensive, Matthew. She had psychic powers, sure. Another vigilante group claimed to have found them and then killed them all before throwing them in the Verdigris River. I have no idea how to pronounce that. Verdigris? It doesn't matter. Another group had claimed to have killed all the Benders in a gunfight and then buried their bodies later in the prairie. However, what's suspicious about all of these kind of like claims is that nobody, not a single person, claimed the $3,000 reward. So it kind of means to me that these are fake. The detective one, fake. Because if he went into the outlaw county, he would have been dead. Shot dead. He would not have even been here. He would be dead as a doornail. He would have been shot. Second of all, nobody claimed the reward money, therefore nobody had any proof. So if you had the bodies, you could just like throw them into like the government, whatever building, and be like, this is the body, where's my money? But none of them did that, so I don't believe any of these are true, to be honest, in my opinion. The story of the Bender murders, the Bloody Benders, it had stretched for far and wide across the nation, and the search for them actually continued on and off for about 50 years after this. Often reported was two women, just like any random two women, just like walking that no one really knew, and people would just assume that they were Elvira and Kate Bender, and they would report them to the authorities. In 1884, it was reported that John Flickinger, which was John Bender's alternative ego, had committed suicide in Lake Michigan. Now, this story gets a bit wild, because as if it already wasn't, but in 1884, a man matching John Bender's description was arrested in Montana for a murder committed in Salmon, Idaho. He had murdered someone by hitting them in the head with a hammer. Suspicious. And then whenever authorities in Kansas got the word about this, they were like, hey, hold him there and we're going to come and identify him. But the suspect cut off his foot to escape his chains, and then he bled to death. And by the time the authorities got there, he was too badly decomposed. Apparently, from Montana to Kansas was like a 3-year journey. I have no idea. I don't understand why that's so badly decomposed. It would take like a couple of days. I don't know. Anyway, regardless, the suspect, his skull was actually claimed as Pa Bender's and was put on display in a saloon in Salmon, Idaho, before the saloon closed in 1920 because of Prohibition. Despite all of this, John Flickinger was never proven to be John Bender. It was just rumored. We're just going to throw that out there, okay? Weeks after the discovery of the bodies on the Bender land, a man named by the name of Addison Roach, the Roaches, remember them, and his son-in-law, William Buxton, they were arrested along with 10 other men for being accessories to the crime, as well as a man named Mitt Cherry, who was one of the leaders in the vigilante groups, who had forged a letter from one of the victims to their wife saying that he had arrived safely in Idaho. Suspicious. In Illinois, not Idaho, sorry. Of those 12 men arrested, it included Brockman, remember him? And he was actually arrested 23 years later for raping and murdering his 18-year-old daughter. This was just a weird time apparently, but I'm glad justice was being served, so can't be too mad about that. This is why I thought the authorities were actually doing their job. On October 31st of 1889, on Halloween, I don't know if Halloween was a real thing back then, but it is right now. So on Halloween of 1889, a woman by the name of Almira Monroe and Sarah Eliza Davis were arrested for theft, and they were found not guilty and they were released, but immediately after they were arrested for the Bender murders. Almira was a tough cookie and she resisted arrest, and she was like, y'all will not take me alive. But she was arrested by Deputy Sheriff Leroy Dick anyway. A woman by the name of Frances McCann was the daughter of one of the victims of the Bender family, and she had been having dreams about her father's murder and had told Sarah Eliza. And I'm guessing Sarah Eliza had done something suspicious because she went to the authorities and reported Almira Monroe and Sarah Eliza Davis. And this is when they were arrested as a result. When they were captured, they immediately started blaming each other. Sarah Eliza Davis claimed that Almira Monroe was Elvira Bender, but Almira Monroe did claim that she was not Elvira, but that Sarah Eliza Davis was Kate. Now, Francis and Deputy Leroy, they had taken the two women to Osage, Kansas, and a 7 of a 13-member panel had decided that these two were in fact Elvira and Kate Bender and sent them to trial. Just like sent them over there. It was like, yep, get them. Now, remember how Elvira had a bunch of husbands and killed a bunch. Remember that. So going back to Almira's daughter Mary Gardy said that she had an affidavit saying that her mother, who was then Almira Shearer, was actually serving time for killing her daughter-in-law, Emily Mark. Now, Almira Shearer was Almira Mark at one time. Now, remember what I told you Elvira's name once was when she married a Simon Mark. Remember? Okay. Anyway, she killed her daughter-in-law and she was serving time at the time, which basically proved that she could not have been Elvira because she was serving time killing her daughter. However, Almira was like, that ain't me. I wasn't doing that. I wasn't that person. That wasn't me. The trial was then held over until May. And that's whenever Almira did confess to being Almira Shearer and to killing her daughter-in-law, Emily Mark. She said that she didn't want this to happen because she didn't want the record, like the judge and jury, like she didn't want the people knowing that she had already committed manslaughter, even though it already proved that she couldn't have been in that place. So I don't know why she didn't want to do that. I don't remember. Sarah's attorney had actually showed Sarah's marriage certificate, which basically said that she was getting married in 1872 somewhere else. And so she could not have been on Bender Farms. She could not have been in the Bender Inn at the time doing the murders because she was off somewhere else getting married. However, in the trial, they had several eyewitness testimonies that locked eyes on these two women and said, yep, that's them, get them. So the case was assigned to a Judge Calvin, and he basically had said that Mary Gardy, who was Almira Monroe's daughter, he was like, I don't like you because you're just like your mother, and I don't believe your affidavit, but you have there was so many other pieces of paper that basically verified what she was saying. So he was like, I don't believe you, but I believe the other pieces of paper. Then he also believed Sarah Eliza Davis's affidavit of her marriage certificate, and he was like, these two women could not be these two other women, so they're free to go. But this kind of received a lot of criticism at the time because the affidavits for the court case and several other paperwork were never stored, they were never seen again, they were never available for future analysis later on. And so this was kind of just like sketchy for some people. They thought that the judge had basically just believed these stories and just let the women go because they didn't want to spend the money to keep board them up for so long. And he basically they thought that the affidavits were fake, and because they knew they were fake, they just threw them away because they didn't want people to find them to say that they were fake. And so they just threw them away, then released the two women as a result. After searching the entire land of the Bender family, it was concluded that at least 20 people had fell victim to the Bender family, and those that were unidentified were buried again at a small gravesite at the base of a small hill near the orchard, and this is now known as the Bender's Mounds. The search of the land had discovered a shoe hammer, a sledgehammer, and a claw hammer, and these three items were given to the Bender Museum in 1967, but the museum was taken over in 1978 and turned into a fire station, but then the items were given to the Cherryvale Museum, and that's where they are today. This is just kind of like a fun fact. The author of Little House on the Prairie was Laura Ingalls Wilder, and she had basically said that as a small girl, she and her father had actually visited the Bender's farm, and that her father, Pa Ingalls, was part of the vigilante group to search for them. But she distinctly remembered her father saying that they would never be caught. And she has said publicly that she has her own reasons for believing this. So I think she knows more than she's letting on, but she's dead, so we can't ask her. But I think it's very suspicious because her father said that they would never be found, and she's also saying, I don't think they'll ever be found either. So I think that that's all very suspicious, and we should be looking into that further. Anyway, my name is Hugh Ramos. This has been Cooking Up Crime. No food today, no filter, very poor lighting, but we're just making it work. If with the filter it has better lighting for whatever reason, we're gonna do that, and I'm sorry. But this has been Cooking Up Crime, and I hope you have a good week, and I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.
I want you to forget your past lives and find me the new Christ. I want your heart to melt like ice in the midst of July.